All right, so we're going to go ahead and get the meeting started. I am calling to order this meeting of the West Hollywood Planning Commission. This is a regularly scheduled meeting, and in case anyone needed a reminder, it is Thursday, February 21st, the day that it snowed in West Hollywood. So, to that, and I'll move on to item 2, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. I would like to ask Director, no longer Interim Director, John Kehoe to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. David Gillig, would you please do roll call for us?
Good evening. Commissioner Hoopengarner?
Present.
Commissioner Erickson?
Present.
Commissioner Buckner?
Here.
Commissioner Bass?
Here.
Commissioner Elchel?
Here.
Vice Chair Carvalero?
Here.
Chair Jones?
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you. Item 4 is approval of the agenda. Are we able to move this, or do we have any changes to tonight's agenda?
We have a motion by Commissioner Bass, seconded by Commissioner Erickson. And the agenda is approved unanimously.
Great, thank you. Item 5 is approval of the minutes for February 7th, 2009. I believe those have actually, if I'm not mistaken, those are being continued to our next meeting, correct?
It's correct. Staff is requesting to March 7th.
Great, thank you. Do we need to move that, or can we?
No.
No, all right. All right, item 6, public comment. Do we have any public speakers?
We have one, Skylar Auld.
Great, thank you. Please, when you come to the podium, state your name and city of residence, and you will have 3 minutes.
Great. My name is Skylar Auld. I live in West Hollywood. I was here 2 weeks ago to speak out against development on West Knoll. I didn't know any of you prior to coming in last week. Ms. Buckner walked in, slapped a guy on the shoulder, and you said, "Tonight's your night." And later I found out that was actually the very developer that I was here to speak out against for West Knoll. What? I hope some night you'll walk in and look a neighbor in the eye and say, "Tonight's your night," instead of with these developers and architects. You all talked about how pretty and how wonderful the building was going to be, but you failed miserably to consider what the neighbors thought or what the impact was going to be with the neighbors. When public comment came, the developer padded comments from people who didn't live anywhere near West Knoll, who will never be impacted by this development. The only two, they even had a homeless person. Go back and watch the tape. A homeless person came out and spoke in favor of this development. The only 2 people who came out and spoke against this was myself and a neighbor. We don't feel like we have a forum that we're being taken seriously or where our actual concerns about safety, traffic, construction, and noise are being taken seriously. You all gave full disclosure by voting, prior to voting, that you had spent hours and weeks in planning commissions and wine tastings and lunches and hot air balloon rides with the developers and architects, but you've never spent any amount of time or taken anything we have to say about all the development on West Knoll seriously. We're not being heard. We're not given any forum to be heard about how this is going to impact us. I've been in the neighborhood for 26 years, and you are just taking out 7 of the 10 houses that are left in this neighborhood. It's not fair, and you're not listening to us, and you're not actually listening to the impact. And when it came time for public comment, you took us from 3 minutes to 2 minutes. 2 minutes to defend a neighborhood I've been in for 26 years. How is that fair? It's not fair. And none of you are listening, and none of you care, and none of you realize that this is going to bury us in construction for years on West Knoll. For years, and nobody cares. I feel like you all have become the John Durand of the Planning Commission, just more puppets to these developers and architects, and you should be ashamed of yourselves, all of you.
Thank you. Any more public comments, David?
No public comments.
Great, thank you. Item 7 is the director's report. And congratulations, John Kehoe.
Thank you very much. John Kehoe, Director of Planning and Development Services. Just one announcement on council items. On Tuesday, the council continued the item on dwelling unit and hotel clarification, so that item will be scheduled for a future city council meeting. There'll be a renotice for that one, so that'll probably come in a month or two to the City Council. And then on the upcoming agenda on March 4th, the City Council will be receiving the staff report and plan for the billboard policy that the Planning Commission looked at a while back. It's not scheduled for a hearing at that time. It's just for the council to receive the document so they can start looking at it. And the idea is that the actual hearing on that will be March 18th.
I'm sorry, what was the
That's
item?
the billboard policy
Billboard,
items
okay,
for
thank you.
projects on Sunset. And that's all I had for tonight.
Great, thank you. Item 8 is items from commissioners. Commissioner Altschul.
It was, I believe, in the last century, I went to a planning seminar of some sort. Perhaps it was a secret seminar, perhaps it wasn't. And there was a young man sitting next to me, and he saw my name, and it said my city of residence underneath it. And he introduced himself as John Kehoe. And he said that he had just applied for a job in the planning department of the city of West Hollywood, and he hoped he'd get it. And here we are, at least some 19 years later, and he got it. We are, I think, are so lucky and so very, very impressed. I'm so very impressed that he is now the permanent director, and loads of luck, congratulations, and enjoyment.
Thank you. Commissioner Erickson.
Thank you. I have a special guest in the audience tonight. I have my mother, the woman who bore me, Mary Erickson, and two people I grew up with, Julie and Craig Cheatham, flew in from one tundra in Illinois and Wisconsin to another tundra here in Southern California. So I've been carting them around and have been in traffic for most of the day. So it's been a wonderful time, but want to give them a shout out because they never get to see me do stuff like this because I never can go home. Additionally, I want to thank all the people that came out to the Vagina Monologues this past weekend. We raised well over $5,000 for Planned Parenthood Los Angeles. Who would have thought right here where that model was, we had a whole bunch of women talking about their vaginas on Saturday and Sunday. So just saying this room is magical, and I want to thank all 400 members of the community that came out on Saturday and Sunday.
Thank you. Anyone else? So I just want to make a quick announcement before our next Planning Commission meeting. This is a shameless plug, but it's for a great cause. If you're not familiar with Lambda Legal, it's hosting its annual Love Lounge event. It will be at Pally House in West Hollywood. I'm on the host committee, co-hosting. It is from 2 to 5 on Sunday, the 3rd of March. Would love to see you there. If you're not familiar with Lambda Legal, it works to advance the recognition of equal civil rights for all LGBTQ people and fighting for the rights of people living with HIV and AIDS in the United States. And they've been incredibly effective in advancing that mission. So just a little public service announcement for you. Anyone else? Great. All right. And with that, we will move on to item 9, consent calendar. There is none. And we will get right into our public hearings. Item 10A is 8120 Santa Monica Boulevard.
Good evening, Chair Jones and members of the Commission. I'm Adrian Gallo with the Current Planning Division. Tonight's item is a determination of compliance with the general plan for a new city-owned surface parking lot. The zoning ordinance exempts city projects from the normal permit review process. Consequently, the Commission is not being asked whether or not the parking lot should be built or to approve a permit for the parking lot. Instead, the Commission is being asked if a public surface parking lot is in compliance with the goals and objectives of the general plan. On the screen is an aerial overview of the subject property, which consists of 4 unimproved lots located at the southwest corner of Santa Monica Boulevard and Crescent Heights Boulevard. To the north, east, and west of the project site are commercial uses along Santa Monica Boulevard, including a mix of restaurant, bar, retail, medical, and personal service uses. To the south of the project site is a mix of single-family homes and multifamily residential structures. The proposed surface parking lot would provide an additional parking for commercial uses in the area with 78 new spaces, including 4 ADA spaces, 26 compact, and 41 standard parking stalls. 6 of the standard stalls will be electric vehicle charging stations. Vehicular access would be provided from driveways on Santa Monica Boulevard and Crescent Heights Boulevard, and an exit-only driveway is proposed on Havenhurst Drive. The parking lot will have perimeter landscaping and canopy trees within an interior island. The parking lot's design includes light fixtures that are strategically placed to illuminate away from the adjacent residences. In response to concerns raised by adjacent residents, the city will install and construct an 8-foot-tall CMU wall along the lot's southern boundary to serve as a buffer to the adjacent residential units. The parking lot would be open from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. and operated as a self-park parking lot. After 2 a.m., the parking lot will be available for residents for overnight parking with city placards. The general plan allows municipal projects in all land use designations and states that the city should balance parking demand and supply in support of the intended physical environment through existing and new strategies. The proposed public parking lot furthers this specific policy. In summary, the addition of the public parking stalls will resolve both on-site and off-site parking concerns in the area, result in less congestion throughout the adjacent residential neighborhood, and invigorate local businesses. This is a temporary use for the site. The public surface parking lot will improve the parking infrastructure in the area and increase the parking availability for the benefit of residents, businesses, and visitors. Therefore, staff recommends that the commission make a determination that the city-owned public surface parking lot is consistent with the general plan. It would be inconsistent with the general plan to leave a property vacant. Thank you, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have, as well as Helen Collins and Vince Carino on the project itself.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions for staff at this time?
I have one. Would the fact that it is a temporary use have any impact on whether it complied with the general plan?
No.
And can you also talk to us about it being a temporary lot? How long is it going to be a temporary lot? What's that process?
Helen wants that question for you. Sorry.
Good evening. My name is Helen Collins. I'm the Facilities and Field Services Manager for the City of West Hollywood. The current timeline for developing the property is not set at this time. This is going to be, as we said, a temporary lot until council has made a decision on what we're going to develop at that location. At that time, we'll go through an extensive public process to determine the best use of that property.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any questions for our special guest?
Just one. My understanding was that one of the reasons that the previous owner of the property failed to develop it was because of the hazardous waste remediation issues. How does that play into turning it into a parking lot, and is the remediation going to happen before it becomes a parking lot?
I'm not sure if that was the reason Walgreens sold the lot. That was not the reason they gave us. We have done some remediation at the location. We've removed all of the contaminated dirt at the location. There are still some residual vapors at the location, but that plays into, the parking lot plays as a benefit to that. The California Water Resources Board has told us that the parking lot is one of the best uses for that. We can't currently use it for active use, but when we get ready to develop in the future, we would have to take other mitigation measures, but nothing to the extent of removal of the dirt, which we've already taken care of.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just have a question.
Sure.
And I meant to call staff. What is a 8-foot-tall CMU lot? What does the CMU stand for?
Concrete masonry unit.
Yeah. It's a block wall.
It's a,
CMU is concrete masonry unit.
thank you very much. See, I'm not a developer, so I didn't know. Thank you.
I have one. So it is safe for the public to use, though?
Correct. It is safe for the public to use.
Okay, thank you.
For parking uses, yes.
All right.
Sue, that means cinder block. It's cinder block.
Any other questions? Okay, great, thank you. So do we have any, there's no presentation because city is the applicant, I guess, kind of. Are there any public comments on this item, David?
We have no public comments.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, well, with that, I will then close the public comment portion of the hearing and we can move into discussion.
I mean, I think that as long as the city owns it, and right now, until they decide what to do with it, I think using it as a parking lot is probably a very good use, benefit the commercial tenants around the area, and also they're going to allow overnight use for residents to do that. So do they have to get a special permit for that? They will get a special overnight permit. And are they charged for the overnight parking?
I can ask Vince, our parking manager.
Thanks.
And as per the ask, so just to lean on staff a little bit, so we're only being asked here to issue our opinion on the general plan consistency for this particular, okay.
Correct.
So let's try to frame the conversation in that way.
Good evening, Vince Guarino, Parking Services Manager for the city.
Oh, I was like, who is this person?
I'm
No,
sorry?
no, please go ahead, please go ahead.
We're planning on charging $9 a quarter for the evening parking for residents, and it will have a hang tag associated with it.
And during the day when residents and visitors are using that parking, is there an hour free or 2 hours free like they do in Beverly Hills?
No, there's
No.
not.
Okay. It's pay.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to staff for having so many people on hand to answer our questions. Any other comments?
Yeah, I think that this is an appropriate use for and fits the general plan and what we're going for. This area itself, we all know that there's parking needed, and what do we call this, mid-city, right? The parking there is atrocious. I'm temporary. I'm sure it will become something lovely in many years to come whenever that process begins. But I am going to say something a little provocative. Many people in this election season have talked a lot about this lot, and I don't see any of them in the audience. And I would just like to say that that's apropos of the problem that we see before our city. And I think this adheres to the general plan, and I'm prepared to support staff's recommendation.
Great, Commissioner Hoopengarner?
Yeah, I think it certainly does adhere to the general plan. I applaud staff in taking what some people could just make a temporary, paved over parking lot and going to great lengths to make it have good flow, some good green space, some trees, et cetera, and to make it into something that even, albeit temporary, is going to work well in the neighborhood. So I look forward to the day when it's no longer there and we have something real. But in the meantime, I think it perfectly complies with the general plan. Thank you.
It looks like we have a motion on the floor. Commissioner Erickson, would you like to state your motion?
Yes, so I am finding that the proposal per staff and the proposed parking lot is consistent with the City of West Hollywood's general plan in creating a temporary parking lot at the corner of Crescent Heights and Santa Monica Boulevard.
Is there any other discussion? It looks like we have a second by Commissioner Buckner. Do we have any other, before we call the question, any other discussion on this item? All right, let's call the question.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Moving on to item 10B, 972 North San Vicente Boulevard. This is a request to demolish 2 detached single-family dwellings and construct and operate a 3-story child daycare center or preschool for this particular property. And thanks again to staff. All hands on deck. We appreciate that. Go ahead.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Antonio Castillo, Associate Planner with the Planning Division. The item before you this evening is a request to redevelop an existing residential property with an approximate 8,300 square foot, 3-story childcare center or a preschool above a 1-level subterranean parking garage The preschool is designed with 6 classrooms to accommodate a maximum of 72 students between the ages of 18 months and 5 years old. The project includes outdoor instructional spaces in the rear area and a separate private outdoor area on the south side for the youngest children. The project is located on the east side of San Vicente Boulevard near the T intersection of San Vicente and Jarrett on a 6,600 square foot site. The property is currently developed with a approximate 1,200 square foot front dwelling facing San Vicente and a approximate 990 square foot detached dwelling above the existing garage. The site and the immediate surrounding parcels are zoned R4B and developed mostly with multifamily structures. The properties further to the north are zoned SSP, the Sunset Specific Plan, including the London Hotel, which is located just 2 parcels north of the subject site along San Vicente. The outdoor playground for the West Hollywood Elementary School is located directly across the street within the PF zone, and its primary building and its main entrance is located along Hammond Street. The building is designed with a playful massing that pulls away from the setbacks, allowing the space and light between the preschool and the neighboring residential buildings. Exterior materials are a combination of plaster and glass and translucent metal panels. The outdoor instructional area is tucked under the top 2 floors of the building in the rear, providing an outdoor room that shelters the children and helps with acoustic control. The outdoor area utilizes lush planting, soft surface paving, and acoustic panels on the walls and above the large soffit of the building. The project has been designed and programmed to accommodate all vehicular drop-off and pickup of children within the subterranean garage at a specified loading area without requiring the parents or caretakers from having to park or exit their vehicle. The program will include 2 groups of students, including Group 1 will have a drop-off schedule between 8:30 a.m. and 9 a.m., and Group 2 will have a drop-off between 9 and 9:30. Pickup is scheduled for Group 1 between 3:30 and 4, and Group 2 between 4 and 4:30. The applicant has proposed the staggering hours to prevent all vehicles from arriving simultaneously. Additionally, the hours for the preschool are programmed to be staggered with the regular school hours of the West Hollywood Elementary across the street. The schedule and outdoor spaces are designed to accommodate 12 to 28 children outdoors at a time. The 8 youngest children will have their own separate outdoor space. The backyard will function as an outdoor instructional space that has been divided into the play areas with the purpose of engaging children's learning. It's staff's assessment that the proposed project conforms with the West Hollywood General Plan and meets the intent of the development standards for non-residential buildings in a residential zone. Staff finds that the proposed project is well suited for the site and would be a positive addition to the city of West Hollywood. A preschool is a permitted use within the residentially zoned district because it provides a needed service for families within a dense city and region. As proposed and as conditioned, the required findings for the demolition, development, and the conditional use permit can be satisfied, including with a condition that allows the director to review the project for compliance after it's in operation, and if the scheduling changes. Therefore, staff recommends that the commission approve the project request, subject to the findings and conditions of approval set forth in your draft resolution. And with that, this concludes my presentation. The project architect, the operator of the preschool, property owner, and the noise consultant or acoustic consultant are present if commission has any questions.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions for staff at this time? Again, let's limit it to questions. None? Oh, Commissioner Hoopengarner?
Hi, Tony. Thank you. A couple of questions. I'm looking at your staff report, page 7, and it says the subterranean garage accommodates 9 vehicles at one time, not including the 11 parking spaces. And I'm looking at the applicant's page 33 with their traffic flow diagram, which shows that in order for the cars to exit, they actually have to veer into the entrance lane, and therefore this diagram is showing only at most 7 cars in the garage at any one time, and that includes one that's basically still out on the street. So can you help me with that?
Sure. So the diagram that's on the screen here and was part of the packet does show, it measures it as if these were large SUVs. But the way the flow goes is you would drive in, drop off the child or pick up the child at the loading area, which is noted in the diagram. So there, the applicant has suggested a specific timing of how that works, how long it would take for a child to be dropped off or picked up. So as they've calculated along with their traffic engineer, they've determined that there would be approximately 9 vehicles that can fit on site all at once as they're circulating. There is the double driveway, so that definitely helps. And there will be staff also managing traffic flow both at the loading area as well as on the sidewalk right at the driveway to assist with vehicles coming in and out.
I guess my concern is that, as this diagram correctly shows, that in order to traverse around that, the bulkhead where the coiling doors are going to be, that car is going to have to swing almost fully into the entrance lane, which means there cannot be any cars in that entrance lane throughout that space. So what would ostensibly be a stacking area for 3 or 4 more cars is not actually functional, because in order for the car that needs to exit has enough turning radius, they're going to have to veer fully into the entrance lane. And that takes out many of the parking spaces. I mean, as their diagram correctly shows, there is maximum of 7 cars in here, and not 9 as it says in the staff report.
Well, the 9 includes the 1 exiting and 1 entering. Yes, the bottleneck area, if you will, along as the car exits, that is something that would need to be managed. That because of the turning radius, they would be encroaching into the 20-foot wide driveway. That is correct.
I mean, that's a substantial impact to both the number of cars that can be pulled off the street as well as the flow. Yes?
It would, I mean, it would have to be managed. I mean, that would be a reality of the way it's designed, sure.
Okay. On the noise study, the noise study stated, and I'm sorry, it was a separate document that was not in the staff report. The noise study states that that the outdoor classroom noise is going to be 46 dBA. Now, in the study, it also gives a chart about sound sources, and 46 dBA is the same noise as a public library. And I'm trying to understand that and wrap my head around how a playground full of 26 children under the age of 5 has the same noise level as a public library. Can you help me with that?
I would need to defer to the acoustic engineer to answer that question. If you, yes, if
Are
you
they here?
may, we can invite them to the podium to assist us with that answer. Now or after they've presented at your discretion.
Yeah, if it's just a question, I think if you can come up to the podium, please.
Hi, My name is William Rosenthal, Shen Wilson Wilkie, acoustical consultant. Sorry, I'm a little bit tall.
Yeah.
So to your point, the thermometer of the decibels is just a reference, and the suggestion of a library, it's similar to this type of space, how you can hear the mechanical systems, the background noise. And the calculation of 46 decibels is at the property line of the property, so not directly adjacent to the children speaking, and taking into account the acoustic mitigations that are implemented.
So you're saying that X distance away, it's going to sound like this room and not a playground?
Yes, at the property line of the property.
At the property line. Okay. Two more, since you're here, noise questions. Your study sort of does a leveling and says, on average, this is the sound. But I have young nieces and nephews, and when they decide to go volume, it is piercing, okay? Love them to death, but that is hard, okay? And I'm trying to reconcile that piercing, which again in your chart here, just loud shouting, is somewhere between around 85 decibels. So if loud shouting is 85, what is a shrieking child?
Well, 85 is quite a loud level. Typically would require a human adult to be able to speak that level. And then the other thing is the distance. So that's about 3 feet away. You might measure it in the 80s.
Okay.
And this study is looking at the impact on the neighboring properties and adjacent uses around, which are going to be farther than that away. And so the noise levels will be lower.
Okay, so related to that question then is the peaks and valleys. So I understand when you're talking about your decibels are sort of an even level, and you say, well, on average, it's this number. On average works fine if you're HVAC equipment, because it's a constant hum. Whether it's a hum at 30 decibels or a hum at 50 decibels, it's still a constant hum. But in a playground, you're going to be talking about considerable spikes in sound based upon said shrieking and screaming. And how do you differentiate that impact? Because to say it's on average 50 is completely different than it's basically 50, it's basically 45, but then it zooms to 80 and then 45 and then zooms to 80. And I think in terms of neighborhood impacts, it's those zooms to 80 that are the real impact and would be a concern. So how is that reflected in this data, and how is it addressed?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct that noise levels are constantly fluctuating up and down, and so it really is necessary to draw a line somewhere through the data and say, okay, well, this is the level we're going to talk about. And so the way the analysis addresses this is that this 46, when the children aren't talking, it goes, well below 46. And when they do talk, it'll rise. And when you average those, the average takes preference to the louder events. So it's incorporating the highest, it takes that shriek, and that's what it's representing. By saying 46, we're talking about at the property line. It'll go up to 46, it'll go back down, it'll go up. And the ambient in the existing area is very important to consider, and the reason that we use the averaging that we do is that we're comparing the same type of average that we use for the ambient and for what we use for the children, so that you can compare the two numbers.
So how have other projects addressed this kind of fluctuation? Because I'm imagining, this is a city of a lot of entrepreneurs and people who have very different schedules, who are sleeping days and who are trying to work from their homes. And again, that low hum of a noise is a completely different impact on your phone calls, on your sleep, on your whatever, than are these huge peaks and spikes. And so how, I mean, having a number on a piece of paper is lovely, but what is the user experience when you have those huge peaks and spikes, and how are those addressed?
Yes, so one way to capture the sort of transient nature of child activity is to use a shorter averaging time. So we looked at the child noise levels in terms of 1-minute averages as opposed to 15-minute or hourly averages, as is commonly used for the other sounds in the environment, traffic noise and such. As to the schedules and the people in the neighborhood, it really is important to look at the existing noise environment and how people are already interacting in this area. And given that we have an elementary school across the street, and there's not sound treatments there, they have a chain link fence that lets all the sound come through. So people in this area are currently living with these transient noise levels of children coming out to recess, going back inside. And so the way that this analysis addresses that is to try and compare the predicted activities at this property to what's already happening in the space. And we found that the noise levels that we expect to be generated are lower than what is already existing. There'll be a fewer number of students, and additionally we've added acoustic mitigations to our property that are not included on a typical property.
Thank you.
While we have you up here, because the acoustic report was not part of it was a separate attachment, are you able to speak quickly to the acoustic mitigations that are in place?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
So specifically in the main mitigation efforts that have been taken are to construct a CMU wall, similar as the other project. And in this case, we're limited to a height of 6 feet, so we've embraced that maximum. And to take it further, we've added soft absorptive surfaces on that wall so that it's not just a hard concrete reflection. Rather, the interior surface will be soft and absorb the sound. So that's sort of the horizontal treatment. And then, as was mentioned briefly, this building has an overhang that goes over the sort of outdoor area. And we're also treating the underside of that overhang so that there's effectively treatment on every surface that is available to us. And we've embraced that to the maximum extent of the municipal code.
Does that include the back of the building? Because the back of the building, I saw the treatments on the walls and the underside of the cantilever, but I didn't see it on the back of the actual building itself.
Yes, the treatment on that surface would be less effective than the ones that are being treated. And if you were to think about the sound that might reflect off of that wall, the vast majority of it will be absorbed by the other surfaces. So it'll either bounce off that and then go to the ceiling, or it'll bounce that wall, go to the floor and then the ceiling, or the floor and then one of the walls at the perimeter of the property. So it is important to kind of look at the geometry and think about the areas that sound might escape from this back space.
Sorry, Stacy, I just wanted to add to that.
Oh, no worries. I wanted to make sure it was stated for the record. Thank you. Any other questions?
I have one.
Sure.
If we could go back to the traffic flow diagram.
This is the sound expert.
I know, my question is for staff, but thank you.
Okay.
On this one, let's say it's 3:30 and it's time to pick folks up. And so parents, particularly those who want to be first in line and not have to wait, have shown up, and the kids aren't down there yet. So you have the one person parked at the loading area there. That's one. Then they'll have somebody behind them. That's 2, 3, 4. You can't have somebody in that next chute because they would be blocking anyone from being able to exit. Then you put somebody back there. There's five vehicles that could be in there queuing until the kids start to come down. You can't have the one behind them because then they'd be blocking the sidewalk, and we don't allow that in their city. Plus, if you're encouraging people to walk, that's not a good thing to do, is block the sidewalk. So you have 5 cars in there. If you can have a total of 72 children at a time, you could have a maximum of 36 cars. I recognize that's not, I see our attorney shaking her head.
I'm not the planner, but cut in half because there's 2 drop-off periods.
Correct.
So it's 36.
So
per
if there's
time.
72 kids, you could have a total of 36 cars. I doubt that it would ever be a total of 36 because you'd have siblings and maybe not full enrollment, but you could have 36 cars. So you have 5 in queue. Where did the other 31 go?
If I may.
I don't mean to be, seriously, you could
No,
have
I think
36
that's a valid
parents show up at
question,
the exact
Commissioner.
same time. Where are they going to go?
If I may suggest that the applicant present their piece, the architect as well as the operator, and we might have some of these answers, some of your questions answered through their presentation, which they haven't done yet.
There's only a half an hour difference between the first group and the second group. So in that half hour, they got to get all the kids, half the kids, before anyone else lines up. What happens if one of the parents from Group B happens to get in front of somebody from Group A? It just seems, anyway, we'll listen to the applicant, but I must say that I've been in a situation like that. I've picked up my grandchildren and my children in a very similar setup, and it doesn't work quite every 45 seconds.
Let's hold off on discussion for right now and commentary. I want to make sure we give the applicant the opportunity to present. Any other questions for staff at this time?
There are 4 people involved in the traffic operations, though. I mean, I'm just highlighting that, right? And could you confirm that? So there are 4, and then is that 4 at each, like, time segment, or is it 2 for the first one and 2 for the second?
4 per period.
4 per, okay, thank you.
But one's at the elevator and the other one's out on the street.
Any other questions for staff?
Just related to that question on the drop-off. So the 4 people, one's out at the street, one's unbuckling a kid from a car seat, one is taking the previous kid up the elevator, and one is at the top of the elevator collecting that kid. While that person's on the elevator taking the child up, at 25 seconds a child, you're unbuckling a child, putting him down on the sidewalk, then you're unbuckling another child, putting him down on the sidewalk. Meanwhile, the elevator's still got to go up, and then they got to pick the kid off, and then the elevator's got to come down. So you've got now a couple kids wandering around in the parking lot unattended because the person who's there is opening the car to get the next child out. So it seems like there's a need for 5. So I'm just asking you, had you looked at that?
We have. The operator has suggested that would be manageable, but I would like to offer them the opportunity to respond to that.
And Commissioner Altschul, did you have a question for staff?
Yes, following up on the cars over the either 5, 7, or 9 that can fit on that diagram, there's probably going to be quite a few more. And somebody asked where they are going to go. I have seen schools like this constantly on my ride to my office. It's especially at the southwest corner of Doheny and Olympic. They have an encroachment permit on Olympic for the queuing for the excess cars that can't fit into the loop at the school. Has this been considered something like an encroachment permit on San Vicente for the excess cars?
Yes, it has. It cannot be in front of the property because that's a red zone.
It isn't in front of the property on Doheny either. It goes lined up toward the west on Olympic.
Yes. So the queuing would not be allowed on San Vicente. That's something that the operator would need to be managing.
And how would you suggest, or how would you contemplate that be managed?
Well, they would have to instruct them to continue going. They cannot stop there, and they would have to turn around. I mean, go around. I suppose.
Make a U-turn on San Vicente.
No, I wouldn't recommend that. Yes, the Public Works has been considering the possibility of having a white zone, a loading area across the street, where there would be more space.
And an 18-month-old kid is going to cross the street?
And that's precisely why we would not recommend that, or it was suggested. But that was, as we been discussing this with the traffic engineer and transportation planner, we were exploring different ways of doing that.
Coming here tonight, Sue and I rode together, and we noticed that there was a red zone south of this building, of this property, for a good long way. What is the reason for that red zone?
The red zone in front of that property and north of it is because the lane moves closer to the curb and gutter. Just south of this property, there are parking spaces. The lanes meander, but the lane gets closer to the curb right at this property.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move into the applicant's presentation. You'll have 10 minutes. Again, just for the record, please state your name and city of residence.
Sorry, I'm now obviously very nervous. Okay, so let's do this. Oh no. Okay. We're going to change the order because you've addressed a lot of very specific questions. I'm going to jump forward and first start with the pickup drop-off to...
Name and city of residence?
Oh,
Yeah, sorry, I was
thank
just
you.
getting ready to say that.
Sorry, I was just preparing you for what's to come. That was part of my presentation, my name. My name is Nasim. I'm here with my parents, Kaveh and Farzana Palavan, and my city of residence is Los Angeles, Melrose Village, if you wanted to know. And I guess I'm being clocked now. So first of all, thank you for letting us speak and for letting me present this project. I'm just going to quickly just start by letting you know who I am and what I'm all about. So my father, who's here with me, is a professor, and he's a world-renowned professor, actually, to be modest, and a PhD and a researcher, and he's really for education. My mom, she owns a preschool that she's successfully run for over 35 years, and it still exists in Massachusetts, and I myself have a master's in business and a master's in early childhood. So as you can see, we're a family that believes in education, and that's what brought us to where we are today. We've had this dream to bring this preschool to fruition and to build something beautiful and something inspiring for children because they deserve it. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're not, developers or people who are going to be on site every day, all day. And we're here. It's important for us to consider the community, and we have very, very, very thoughtfully done that. I've been working on this project for over 3 years, if you can imagine, and that's actually with my team being the architect, landscape architect, our traffic consultant who's here, who'll probably be speaking also, our sound engineer, and the planning committee. So this is not something that's just thrown together. So just understand your questions, we'll have answers. So 3 years later, here we are. Just to address quickly why West Hollywood, I think just very simply, you guys need preschools. You have over 1,000 children that are between 0 and 4, and you have less than 250 spots. And those are for children less than 5, so that those numbers are even more skewed against the favor of children in your community. And there are not a lot of schools in a very close area. So we've been kind of committed to this service, this community service. It's in line with the general plan. It's something that's needed according to your community studies. And so I think that's pretty clear. To talk specifically about the pickup and drop off, as you see, this slide is I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, no, you see it? Do you see the slide? Yeah, I don't know how this works.
Is this
sorry.
the traffic circulation slide?
Yeah,
we can see
sorry.
it.
I guess you have it in front of you, sorry. So the yellow dotted line is a no standing zone, and cars will not be able to idle in that space, and that's how you avoid being able to, it'll be like a striped marked area. Putting stripes in the actual diagram here would be a little bit overwhelming, I think, but the yellow dotted line basically shows an area that prevents people from being able to enter in order to guarantee that somebody who's leaving the loading carpool space actually can exit safely. So that's considered. There are 4 staff members, but there could be more, there could be 5 if necessary. This is ebb and flow. This is an evolving process, and the goal that we have in designing this carpool space is to not have traffic on San Vicente. Please understand that we've taken over 1 full year before we even did the building just to try to figure this out, to make sure that there wouldn't be traffic on San Vicente. This is something we worked with the planning committee, with Bob Chung, we've hired consultants. This is very thoughtful design. So to walk you through it, you come down the queue, you go into the carpool spot. Carpool is a term that's specifically used for schools with young children who a parent or a caregiver comes, pulls up, the child gets pulled out, and then the car leaves without the parent leaving the car. So that when I refer to the word carpool, that's what I'm implying, not multiple people in the car. So the assumption is you have at least the average would be about 1.2 children per car, and so you have about 30 cars for every half an hour period. And that's I think probably it's going to be even less with people being late, with all sorts of other factors related to small children being sick, etc. But you come down, you stop, the person stops. Teacher A takes the child out of the car. Teacher B comes and collects the child from teacher A, and teacher B and C alternate and organize to be able to get the child up to the first floor safely without ever the child being alone, without any children being alone. And teacher D is on the street with a walkie-talkie communication. Am I too close to this mic? Sorry. Obviously, yeah, a newbie. And teacher D is on the top of the driveway that's signaling downstairs to anybody if there's any issues that need to be known. When it comes to pickup time, teacher D would be walking names to the teacher that's upstairs with the students already lined up in the waiting area. And so the children would be escorted down by, in order by name of caregiver that's coming down to pick up that child. So their last name would be shown at the top of the driveway as they come down. The children have enough notice to come down the elevator and to be picked up before the car even makes it to the carpool first spot. The time that it takes from the first car to stop, unload, leave, and the second car to come is 25 seconds at generous. And that's assuming because there are obviously going to be some kids who are more finicky than others. But I'm assuming you guys have all seen the videos that we forwarded? No. So we'll have some videos that we can show you and if necessary, but we actually have, okay, they were supposed to have been emailed. But there were videos that I had basically made to demonstrate the time it takes to unload or to load a child into a car seat for just the visual understanding of timing. And when we did it on, when you're doing it every day, all day for 72 kids at max, but you get pretty good at it and you get pretty efficient. And so as a mom myself with 2 kids, I'm pretty efficient also. And so it clocked to about 17 or 18 seconds and 21 seconds for unloading and loading a child. So there is some room there for buffer. And then just basically our assumption is you need a minute per car, and we only need 25 seconds, but we're giving them a minute per car. So that's what the numbers sort of boil down to. And I'm not going through the whole presentation, but just to address the backyard noise. So the way that the backyard is designed, as we talked about the acoustical materials that are actually absorbing, we have like what's what's like a cocoon in the backyard. And that cocoon is one that that just sucks up all that noise that the children are emanating. But please understand, this is a very important point. Please understand that this is not a playground, okay? It is not a playground. This is actually an educational facility with academic instruction that's occurring in an outdoor space for children to have fresh air and to take advantage of Los Angeles. And Los Angeles is wonderful 365. So growing up in Boston, I really can appreciate that. But again, this is not a playground, and we have taken into account when designing what activities will be outside and taking the city into account, or taking the neighbors into account when we've spoken to them. We've actually already to this day altered our program, understanding that people are worried about traffic, people are worried about sound. We get it. We get it, and we've been working on it, and we've hired consultants, and we have a team of very professional, unbiased people who have walked us through this. And we've removed our outdoor musical instruments, we've removed our tricycle moving space, and we've created in the outdoor space where it is not covered by the soffit, where there is a little bit more openness to the sound travel. We've created those as quiet zones, like sand pits and library spaces or ateliers or things that are not loud. But this is not a playground. We do not have a school of screaming young children. And the baseline that we're using, that was 60 dBA, was the max in that time that when we were checking for what the children do. It was a like school. It was also a preschool, so it was real live data. So just to give you a sense of the kind of thought that we've put into this. So just to know, I guess I'll finish my part and just say that basically we're just people who are trying to build a good dream. We're a dream that we think that children in your community deserve, and we've been working 3 years on this. This is not something that I take very lightly. This is something I'm very, very serious about, and I'm very, very thoughtful in every single square inch of this space, every square inch. And I don't mean thoughtful just for my students. I mean thoughtful for my staff. I mean thoughtful for my parents. I mean thoughtful for my community, and I mean thoughtful for my passerbys. So I'm open to answering any questions, of course.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap.
Just a procedural question for city attorney and staff. Should we wait to hold questions until we discuss, or should we ask the applicant questions now?
I think you could ask the applicant questions
Okay,
now.
Commissioner Altschul?
You didn't answer quite a few of the questions that were asked.
Okay, sorry. If you repeat specific questions, and I'll.
Interrupting
I'm
me.
very nervous. Oh, yes. The architect is also available, and so is the sound engineer and the traffic consultant. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
This is not a discussion. I get to talk, and then you get to talk. As a matter of fact, one of the things that concerned me was that when you approached and took the podium, and the chair asked you to state your name and your city of residence, you bounded right into your presentation without having listened to that and not giving your name. You have an impressive CD, but if you're teaching and having charge of 72 students every single day, I'm a little concerned about your listening ability. Do you have a problem with that?
Do I have a problem with your comment, or do I have a problem with listening?
With listening.
As I said, I'm very nervous, so I apologize for not being able to.
I know you're
give
not
you my
accustomed to this,
undivided attention.
but there are some main issues that you didn't choose to touch.
It wasn't a choice. It was just me.
I haven't gotten to my question yet.
Oh, okay.
There are some main issues that you didn't choose to touch, so I hope your other people that are making the presentations do, and you might remind them of what those issues are, please. Thank you. Not at the microphone, but privately.
So, do you have a question for the applicant, Commissioner Altschul?
The main one in my mind is, where did the people queue that can't get into the entry line? And what are you going to do to get them to to comply with your instructions about what they should do?
Okay, so from the data that we have looked at, and I'm going to defer this question after I comment, but to my traffic engineer, but just to understand that when I was explaining that we're allotting 1 car per minute, the way that pickup and drop off works is all the parents do not come at one time because you don't have a hard stop begin
Well, I heard that.
or end.
I
Right.
heard that. I'm not necessarily sure it's true. I don't think it works that way, but thank you.
Okay, so
I don't think it works
if
that way,
there
but
was,
thank you.
okay, so if there was a car, that's why we have somebody at the top of the lot. And like it was explained before, we would probably just have them drive around the corner because we are not queuing on San Vicente. When you ask where did they queue, they do not queue on San Vicente. So if a parent has to turn the block, going east on Sunset and then coming back down Larrabee and then coming back east on, I guess Cynthia's next, and then coming back up San Vicente, then that's what they'll do.
Disseminate that information.
Well, I will have no problem explaining the carpool system, and they will have to sign a waiver saying that they understand what the carpool rules are. But there's also a teacher for that reason.
Disseminate that information.
When they enroll, they used to typically give a package. It's standard protocol that you would give a package and you would explain all the rules and regulations. It's called Parent Handbook, and carpool would be part of that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any additional questions for the applicant? Go ahead, Commissioner Erickson.
Thank you so much for coming out and taking the time. I hate speaking in public, and I'm up here. So don't worry about it. Take a breath. We're
Thank
here to
you.
get the answers.
I don't have
We'll
time
be
to read.
okay. So don't worry about it. I noticed, and so in our staff report, it says you had the community meeting. What community outreach did you do to the West Hollywood Elementary School?
With the West Hollywood Elementary School, I contacted the principal, and actually I met her in person as well, very, very briefly, but to be
So you have
honest,
been in touch with that school?
Yes, and they actually the principal put me in touch with kind of a chain of people that were only concerned with, or their biggest concern was related to the unloading route for construction, and this was a few months ago, so I don't remember the exact terminology, but they gave us what I requested, I should say, I should take credit. What I requested was their ideal list of requirements for during construction time. What are the things that they need so that when I have a contractor, I already have this piece of paper to make sure that that's part of my my package with my contractor that they would sign, knowing that they're going to have to follow these specific rules and regulations to accommodate the safety of the children and the convenience of the school. Especially because they have a crazy carpool on the other side, and trucks basically, none of my trucks will go there.
Yeah.
That's a deal breaker.
Thank you for that. And then additionally, in terms of your noise study, did your noise consultant consult or look at what the noise output from West Hollywood Elementary School was in relation to this? Because they have actually a significant outdoor space, much to the chagrin of some neighbors during the school year, but you know, we love children, and I have nieces and nephews, and their screams may pierce my ears, but they warm my heart. So,
Yes,
but
it's
have
much
you done
higher
that?
than- I shouldn't say, yeah, that he actually did, and he can speak to that more directly if
I
you'd
would,
like, but he
and that
has
was my
looked
main
at it,
question.
And basically, the noise output would be, it's actually lower from my side of the street. It's lower than the traffic. The traffic noise is actually significantly high on San Vicente. So the main source of noise is actually going to be the large trucks and things of that sort. But the noise that comes from the school would be higher than the estimated noise level that would come from our school, because there isn't, from a professional standpoint, because there's a big open lot with a bunch of kids running around, as opposed to literally no run space. You know, we've designed activity spaces. Ours is an outdoor classroom. It is not, an open space for running.
Thank you. Those are all the
So
questions I
higher.
had at this
Thank
time.
you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Hoopengarner?
Yes, I'm curious as to if you explored the idea of reversing the building
Yes.
and putting the play space in the front so it would be proximate to the play space across the street and away from the neighbors.
Yes, we did explore that idea, and that was a non-possible. It was a non-starter, I think is the expression. Thank you. Just because of a lot of rules and regulations, but one of them being that it doesn't align with the general plan of what West Hollywood wants their buildings to look like, and you know, that's one of the biggest reasons. And another reason, and I think my architects can go into that. It's more of an architectural question, but another one, just logistically, it's not possible because of the placement of the transformer and the setbacks and all, and the cantilevered building and blah, blah, blah. We did look into that. Actually, that was the suggestion from our neighborhood meeting. There was one of the neighborhood members who came, and she very, very professionally and kindly articulated some serious concerns, and we had a very good dialogue. And she's actually a voiceover specialist with a lot of friends who are sound engineers. So we had some really great conversations online and offline regarding the not only placement, but what to do, how to mitigate it. And she was kind enough in the sound study, she was kind enough to give us access to her balcony so that we could actually measure the sound, because there's an alleyway that's basically the back of my building and the back of the neighboring buildings. The way it kind of, all of the buildings go back to back between Larrabee and San Vicente, and it creates an alleyway that she refers to as the echo chamber. And that was, her building is on Larrabee, 949 Larrabee, which is southeast of my property, like 3 buildings away. So we actually had our sound engineer go to her building and take recordings and then estimate what the sound of our backyard would be based on the recordings and the placement of our place versus theirs. And what we found was actually quite interesting, that our sound would basically half getting to her because of the design because of this sort of cocoon, if you will, the design that we're making. But the problem with, for example, the London Hotel is it faces it, and it has a direct line of sight to her balcony. And direct line of sight, I've learned, is a very important term when it comes to acoustics. And if you can see it, you can hear it better. But the more that's in between, the less you can see, the less you can hear. And since our children are like 3 feet, they're harder to hear and see over a 6-foot wall. So there is an advantage. Their height impairment, if you will, is actually an advantage to sound projection. So I guess that was a long answer. Sorry.
Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Bass?
I would like to ask about the 25 seconds. I've never put a child in a car seat or taken one out. I have nieces and nephews, but I leave that up to their parents. But having watched that, I'm considering a situation right now with 2 very well-behaved, a niece and a nephew, and their mother, does it all the time because she has 2 children. I've never seen her accomplish that in 25 seconds. So I recognize that somebody
we have videos
could,
for that.
but
So we have actual recordings if you would like to see them before. Are they set up to watch? Is that something that is of interest to you guys?
I mean, if it wasn't included in the presentation,
It was, but then there's technical difficulties with clicking through.
I just mean within the time that's allocated for your presentation. If you'd like, we can include it in your rebuttal. But what I want to make sure is that we limit this to questions for the applicant, give the public the opportunity to comment, and then you will have.
The question really is, no, and I'll tell you, much like Commissioner Erickson mentioned when he first started, I'm fine when I'm up here, but when I have to stand down there for another commission or the city council, I get very nervous and my voice shakes. I don't like being in that spot. But how is that determined? Was that just how fast you can do it? Was that is this off of some sort of industry standard? Where does that 25 number come from?
It's how fast a mom does it, how fast somebody who does it regularly does it. So I like a teacher who's going to be there doing it over and over and over is probably going to do it faster than a parent, because first of all, you get a lot of less resistance than a parent who does it because of the emotional relationship involved. But I basically just did it and timed it. I have 2 children, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, so something that I
For the record.
Thank you.
regularly.
Oh, excuse me.
And I do it, by the way, with my friends' children also, so I'm not just familiar with theirs.
Commissioner Altschul?
You have 6 classrooms, correct?
Correct.
How many, and 72 students, so that's 12 per classroom?
Not exactly, but that's a fair generalization.
Well, 6 into 72.
Would you like the exact breakdown? I believe it's, the first floor is about 8 students because they're the smallest, they're the youngest.
So some have more than 12?
Yes.
So it's a minimum of 8 and a maximum of how much?
I think my final breakdown, and it will change per year probably, just based on enrollment and ages, but the general breakdown right now, I believe, was 8, 12, 12, 15, 15, 12, something like that. Or I don't know if that adds up exactly. Originally it was 8, 12, 12, 12, 12, 16, but then I realized that with TK across the street, probably that'll change.
Do you have in the room?
The ratio is going to be 1 to 4 or 1 to 5,
Pardon?
around there.
Pardon?
The ratio will be 1 to 4 or 1 to 5, so depending on the classroom. There'll be about...
With 12 children, there'll be
that'll,
4 adults in the room.
For 12 children, no, that'll be 3 adults in the room.
Well, 1 to 4, that's 3, you're right.
Yes.
So how many teachers are you going to have altogether?
About 16 teachers.
Where are they going to park?
So we have some parking on site. That's we have 11 spots on site, and then not all teachers will have cars, to be honest, and we'll just make arrangements either if they're parking in the neighborhood or if I have to secure parking for them somewhere. That's kind of something we're figuring out. If you take into account the already existing schools, none of them, not a single one, has as much parking as us, even with more children. So.
By existing schools, do you mean preschools or do you mean like
Preschools,
West?
sorry.
Okay.
Only in the preschool world, yes. Thank you for the clarification.
Chair, just for the record, I did request of the staff if there was any video showing this 25-second turnaround and was told it would be presented and that we would get it. And I didn't know if I was going to get it via email or tonight, but it was a request.
Okay.
Yeah, that was why we made it, actually, because of the official request, because I'll be honest, I didn't make it before. I just timed it before. And so, yeah.
Okay, let's figure out a way to build it into your rebuttal. I just want to make sure that we are giving everybody adequate amount of time to speak and present and are adhering to the policies of the commission. Thank you. Do we have any additional questions for the applicant at this time? No? All right, thank you very much. We will, actually, I think, we don't usually do this at this time, but prior to public comment, I would like to ask if we have any disclosures. I should have asked this after the staff report, and I did not. Disclosures. Are there any disclosures? No. Oh, go ahead, Rogerio.
Yeah, when they came to design review, I wasn't able to be at that meeting, so I sent in my questions, and those questions are in the staff report. And the applicant sent answers to those questions to me directly via email. We spoke briefly on the phone about those questions, and I approved it and said I had no more questions, and that was the extent of our conversation.
Okay, thank you very much for clarifying. I just want to make sure that everyone knows before public comment that we had a disclosure. All right, so we move into public comment. Our first public speaker is Christina Bermudez, followed by John Viscott. Again, please, just for the record, because we need to be able to write this into the minutes, please state your name and city of residence when you come to the podium. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christina Bermudez. I'm a resident of West Hollywood on Larrabee Street. I'm actually the resident that Nasim referred to earlier who had the sound test done on her balcony. And I was actually also the person who asked if the backyard could be moved to the front of the building because there's already sound issues on the San Vicente side. So I live at the back of, if I can just indicate here, this is the echo chamber that we're talking about, like right in here between these buildings. And I believe this building is my building. So that's basically what I'm referring to. I would like to thank Nasim for conducting the sound study. However, I think that the results of this study as they relate, I am nervous. It's a little nerve-wracking up here. Okay, so, sorry. Yes, so I think that the results of the study as they relate to my building, 949 Larrabee Street, and the neighbors who are at the backs of those buildings is inconclusive. The sound test that was done from my balcony was done on January 8th, 2019 for 10 minutes on a Tuesday morning from 8:10 a.m. to 8:20 a.m. Now this was during rush hour traffic. The results of the test state that the noise level coming from the proposed preschool site will decrease as it gets to 949 Larrabee, which is what Nasim also said earlier. But this test did not factor in the echo chamber aspect of that. The phenomenon that happens in the space as the sound bounces off of the cement buildings. Not a single person was in that space when this test was done. The point I've been trying to stress at the multiple meetings that we've had about this project is that the sound in the area where all these buildings butt ends bounces and creates an echo chamber. Currently, no children live in these buildings. There are no children playing in the outside backyards of any of these buildings here. I'm concerned with what will happen when up to 28 children are added into this environment. As I've stated before at previous meetings, when someone at the London Hotel is speaking at a normal volume on their balcony, I can hear it inside my apartment, all the way down the street at 949 Larrabee. So that is, somebody is up here on their balcony, I'm all the way here, and I can hear it inside. So I would just like to request that another sound test be done that includes the echo chamber phenomenon. I would also like to note that I did inform the man conducting the test about the echo chamber effect, and I was also never shown the calculations that were taken from my apartment. Aside from the sound study, oh man, I have a couple of design questions that have nothing to do with the sound study that I was.
Well, I hate to say this, but your time is up. I mean, we
Okay.
have 3 minutes. Thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you.
John Viscott?
Hi, John Viscott, resident of West Hollywood for 24 years on San Vicente. This is my first time coming up and speaking ever. You guys know me. So I have to say, this is a pretty ill-conceived idea. I've lived exactly across the street from this place for 24 years. The London has a loading zone, 50 feet, maybe 25 feet from this location. The idea that you're going to queue cars on San Vicente, or somehow magically these cars are going to circle around the neighborhood is just ludicrous. At sunset, we have a no right turn sign that comes on. The cars queue and sit. They can't make a right turn until it goes green. So where are these cars going to go? It's just not going to happen. You've got people speeding up and down San Vicente. You've got the fire department at Cynthia, very active. You've got the ambulances, very active up and down this street. This is just, as you guys are pointing out, how do you queue these cars? How do you move these people in the allotted time? It doesn't make any sense. I really invite you to come and stand in front of my building during these hours that they claim they're going to be moving cars in and out. You'll see it's pretty ridiculous that they're going to try to queue these. You've got West Hollywood Elementary, a block over, where it's a fairly quiet street, and it's quite a mess in the morning and afternoons when people are dropping off cars. So now you're going to try to do something like that on San Vicente, which is actually a very dangerous street. So I really invite you to come and actually go out onto the street and see what really goes on in our neighborhood, because this is something that just does not belong on such a crazy busy street. Plus, there's a crosswalk there with the blinking lights. Cars don't stop. We don't have any parking in the neighborhood, so if you're going to give them parking space, what benefit does that give to the residents? You're taking more parking away. And I know these architects built a building 2 doors down, and we had problems during the whole construction period with homeless in the buildings. They didn't have the gates properly locked. Their construction crews were blocking the flow of traffic on Sunset. They were sneaking their cones up more and more and more in front of our buildings, so we couldn't even get out of our driveways. It's just going to be more chaos again. And so even when it's done, bottom line is it doesn't matter what the plan is on the lot. You're not going to be able to move these kind of cars and people in the amount of time that they claim that they're going to do that. So I think really hard about it. I think it's a really, really bad idea to do something like this on such a dangerous street. Thank you.
Thank you. David, do we have any other public speakers?
No other public speakers, just applicant's rebuttal.
All right, thank you. So the applicant will have 5 minutes to rebut. I, again, would advise of whether you want to, we can show the videos when you like, or video, if you need time to get those queued up, but they should be a part of the rebuttal. Can I have a second? Sure.
We're just going to start our rebuttal with the videos.
Sorry, can you just come up to the thing?
Sorry.
It's okay.
We're gonna, if that's okay, can we start the rebuttal with the 2 videos, and then I'll have my traffic consultant.
It's your rebuttal. You can run it however you like.
Okay, thank you.
On San Vicente, in the middle of the street?
No, this would be inside the building. What happened? Was it just to show one, or did you want to, are you getting a kid out of the other side too?
I assume he's opening up.
Oh, here it is, okay.
That's not the beginning of it.
Hello, my name's George Reiner with Crane and Associates. Our office is in Culver City. I live in Los Angeles. We've looked very carefully at the traffic queuing, and one of the most important things that we emphasized, and that yes, Nasim is aware of and doing, is that unlike elementary schools, because we deal with a lot of elementary schools where you have a bell going off and all your students have to be there, the day starts right at that time. That's not the way a preschool works, in that it will be arrivals spread over the half hour. So the queuing which you see at an elementary school is due to, if you will, the school bell ringing. So that is a very critical distinction that is made between the two. The second is that the students will be at all times not with their parents who will be behind the wheel, but rather with one teacher helping them out and then another teacher taking them up through the elevators. So that's what makes the 25 seconds a conservative estimate, is that rather than if you think of, if you're getting your grandchild out of the car, you get out of the car, away from the wheel, you walk around to the other side of the car, open the door, and then you first start taking them out. So that's why the process has been set up to be much quicker. I'm here to answer any other questions you might have.
Thank you. Do you want to continue the rebuttal through the remainder of your time? That's your prerogative, certainly.
Okay, yeah, sure. I was just going to say that when it comes to pick up and drop off, you have, realistically, if you have small children in your family, you understand that there are some parents who are rushing in the morning because they have a meeting, they have to go to work, they have to get there. And there are some parents that they don't necessarily have a deadline and they're taking their time, dragging their feet, drinking their coffee, enjoying their day. There is just the force of nature that creates a spread amongst the timing of parents. So there is under no true, if you're going to be honest about what actually happens in real life, there is no situation where 30 cars show up at one time. That just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen that when people are coming from all over the place to get to their house, to get to the school, that they all show up at one time. So what we're banking on is the fact that it takes every 25 seconds, there's a new space for somebody. So if it's really moving as fast as it shows to move, and if the teachers are as efficient as they say to be efficient, then we're going to be fine. And if it's not, the one question nobody's asking is, well, what do we do if it doesn't work out? If our estimations are not accurate? You're questioning the estimations, but you're not questioning the backup plan. The backup plan is, well, we have other spots, for example, and if we just have less teachers parking there for whatever reason because it's not working, or we redistribute the time, or we have an early pickup and a late drop-off. There are other options, but the point is that we're committed to not having a backup on San Vicente, and part of the conditions is that we continue talking to Public Works. And we've already talked to Public Works, and they were in agreement with the fact that the 30 minutes was on point. It was the city's engineer that was in agreement with the fact that 30 minutes seems reasonable for 30 people when 30 cars when you have a 25-second situation. So I think it seems like there's a lot of focus on the traffic, and that seems to be the one big holdup. And I respect that. I understand that. I live in LA. I know it stinks. It stinks for all of us. I don't fly on a jet to get anywhere. I get it personally, and I'm committed to making sure that it doesn't impact the community. So I don't know how this works if people ask questions. Or.
Well, so your presentation, it's unless anybody else wants to speak for 37 seconds.
Yeah, 37 seconds. Oh, sorry.
Just someone to introduce Lorcan O'Hurley. I'm the architect of the project, and just to say that we've been very concerned and aware of these issues of traffic and sound, and we did design the building to see these as critical issues. So in a way, we try to address that from the get-go, and that was an important issue with the design. Ultimately, we wanted to create a great environment for kids, an uplifting environment, and be able to accomplish and address these issues that are the greatest concerns: sound and traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. You have 10 seconds left.
So, what's going on? What's for dinner?
You can end it if you like.
Let's kill it.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for the applicant at this time?
I do.
Commissioner Hubengarner?
I thank you for the video. But these are children from 18 months to 5 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
At least half of them are in diapers. Do they come with a diaper bag? Do they come with a teddy bear? Do they come with other accoutrements that have to come out of the car?
So sometimes, well, they might have a lunchbox, and that would just be on the floor. You just grab it as you go. It's not something that's going to be a hassle, if you will. Their diapers are kept, and their extra change of clothes are kept on site. They have boxes in their school cubbies for those things. So, I don't bring that stuff to my daughter's preschool or my son's classes.
Okay,
so maybe they'll have a lunchbox that they'll be holding. Typically, the child would be holding it, and when you grab them, the child would be holding their own lunchbox. They'll be old enough to do that.
So when I like to hear that's there. So they have their own box in the schoolroom where they have extra change of clothes because it's
and
kids,
diapers.
and
Yeah,
okay.
they have to, yeah.
But that has to be then brought in by the parent and changed out. So that would be happening at the same time?
Well, you usually have multiple changes at a time, and then if there's necessary, then you send a note, and or when you send something home, you just give them a bag, and they bring a bag back. It's not super complicated of a story. You just have the child hold the bag. They're responsible. The children are responsible for their own stuff.
Understood. I guess my point is, though, that there
time.
appears to be a need to take another bag and more things out or put them into the car,
Right.
which to me would add time to that.
Right. Well, our estimation is 25 seconds. Of those times were 17 and 21 seconds. So to keep in mind, there is time to grab a bag or lunchbox or something from the floor. It's unusual that it would be somewhere other than the floor underneath the children's feet or in the parents' passenger seat. So, and we are, like, the time it takes to unload 30 children is about 12.5 minutes in this time period, and we're giving it 30 minutes. So we're trying to take all these things into account and giving buffers and knowing some are fast, some are slow, just like some parents are fast and slow and will show up early or late. And if it doesn't work, this is an evolving process, and if it doesn't work, we will tweak it because we want to as a school, not because you're telling me to, but because I don't want complaints. I don't want neighbors to be unhappy. That's not the kind of environment that brings the kind of energy that I want to have for my children.
Thank you.
Commissioner Altschul?
You showed a video where toddlers were taken out of the rear of a car into the traffic lane instead of the curb. You also showed that same video, which only showed a maximum of 2 cars and didn't pan to see if or whether there were any other cars behind the second car. In your estimation, what does that video show that supports your claims of being able to handle traffic?
So, and that's a bit of a technical question, but just for my understanding, and if my sound engineer feels like he needs to step in, he can, but the way that you measure time is actually from the beginning of one car.
Urge people to take toddlers out into the traffic lane rather than the curb lane.
Oh, so that was just for the sake, that was just the configuration of my car currently, but there is no traffic lane or not traffic lane. You're underground and it's in a controlled environment. It's all about where their car seat is, and we're going to encourage children to have the car seat on the other side, but my car seat was not, so that's why I did it that way.
That video is not representative of what would be
It would be
going
exactly
on
the
at
same
your-
thing on the opposite side of the car.
Video is not representative of what's going on in your business, is that correct? Because
well-
you're not in the street, you're not taking children out into a traffic lane.
We are not taking
You
children
have
out into
more
a traffic lane.
in a queue.
Right.
What does that video show?
It shows the time it takes for a car to pull up and for a child to be removed from the car and then the car to leave. That's what it takes, and the next
Out of
car
a
to
car
come
and-
up. It would take exactly the same time if the car seat was on the other side.
Child out of a car with no cars but one showing queued up. That's what that shows, right?
Excuse me.
Commissioner Buckner?
Yeah.
There's also a situation where there would be more than one child in the car, in
Right.
2 different car seats.
Right.
And you've got one person taking the child out of the car on one side and another on the other side because they have to be in the back seat. And it takes more time, and you only have one teacher there to take the child out. So that's a situation. I'm just saying that it gets a little bit more complicated than what you've presented to us. It doesn't mean that it's not possible. You know, I don't really know if it's possible or not. I have had 4 grandchildren and 2 children, and have dropped them off at school. And as a matter of fact, the school that my children went to had a configuration pretty much the same as your loading zone, with the circle and cars coming and teachers taking the children out and whatever. So it was pretty much exactly the same, actually, not underneath the building, but it was in the open. But space probably about the same size as what you have here. But I'm more concerned about putting the children into the car, because it's easy to pop a seatbelt and pull a child out of the car, but getting the child into the car and then getting the seatbelt on takes longer. So picking the children up after school is an issue too, not just drop off in the morning.
Correct.
So, I mean, I'm going to save the rest of my comments for Commissioner comments, but I think it's maybe doable, but it feels very questionable to me.
So in the situation where if you have, for example, if we're finding that there are a lot of siblings, or we're finding that parents actually have car seats on the, behind the driver's side, typically car seats are actually behind the passenger side, but in my case it wasn't, so I changed the view. I didn't change the car seat. And I guess in hindsight I should have been a bit more consistent with that. But if in fact we find that that this is an issue, the placement of the car seat is an issue, then we'll add another teacher to be on the middle of it, on the center of the circle, taking out from the other side. So we have somebody already ready constantly. Or if we find that that's not enough and we need another teacher to help go up and down the elevator, we can do that too, because we have 16 staff members. We're not like bootstrapped here. This is sort of generous in our ratios. It's well below the state licensing requirements. And because we care about what we're doing and making sure everybody's safe.
We had a lot more
So-
than 4 teachers in the morning doing the same
Okay,
process.
well, I would love to offline get any advice from you that would help the process.
And I didn't create it, I just experienced it, so.
Right, but whatever, as an experience or whatever complaints you have, I'd love to know to mitigate.
So to Commissioner Buckner's question about pickup. Drop-off is relatively easy in as much as child goes up, child goes up, child goes up. But then you're going to stage for the 30-minute pickup period the 36 children that are going to be picked up. How does that work? Are they all going to stand near the elevator at the first floor and wait until they know their parent or pickup person has arrived? And then someone has to call up to the first floor and say, send down child A. And then the next car is going to be, oh, look, it's, you know, Susie, and therefore it's send child B. I mean, how does that staging work?
So, so typically we would have all the children within that time slot. They would be waiting in front of the space outside of the elevator. So you have an elevator, a reception, and then you have an open area. That's an enclosed sort of garden, if you will. And in that space, you can easily just have the children come down on the first floor all together that will have a pickup time within that time slot. And you'll have teachers there, you know, keeping them entertained, if you will, and engaging with them while a parent is, or a caregiver, I should say, is coming down the ramp. They would show a card with the name of the last name of the child, last and first if there are multiple, and that parent, as they're coming down, that the teacher D, if you will, the teacher that's at the top of the ramp, would radio down. The person would come not from their classroom, but from a queue area waiting.
Missing this, is the garden area in the
It's
in the
that
garage?
entrance. When you walk into the building and you walk down the pedestrian, you enter through a glass door.
Oh,
and
so
then
it's
you
on
have
the
a
first
secondary
floor?
door. On the first floor, yes.
Okay,
They'd be
I
waiting on the
understood it was
first
in the
floor.
garage area, that's why I was confused.
No, I'm sorry, on the first floor. The garden area on the first floor, so that they would be right outside the elevator. So when they're walking, they just go one by one. They just kind of line up and run downstairs. So when you walk into the building, you walk through, from the pedestrian perspective, so on the first floor, ground floor, you go through the half level or half height glass door, and then you enter, and there's another door, and then you enter a kind of almost a long outdoor corridor or garden area or whatever the term would be. And on the right, you would have the entrance. At the end of that space, you'd have the entrance to the reception, and right behind that is the elevator. So they would come down from their classrooms or come over from their classrooms and go from there. Is that?
Thank you.
Sure.
Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment portion of the hearing, and, well, close the public hearing, and we're going to go ahead and move into discussion here. Who would like to go first? Commissioner Erickson? Oh, okay.
I have a question for staff really quickly. I don't want to make my comments just yet, but I do have a question for staff. I'm having a hard time finding it in here, but when I read my report, I think that it talked about that this would create jobs in the city of West Hollywood. Am I making that up? Did I read that in my report? That it would be a benefit to the city because of the jobs created?
That might be found in the finding for the CUP. Let me locate that section.
I'm trying to see the number there of jobs being created.
Oh, it's not in the staff report, no.
Is it in the resolution?
It's in section B, I'm sorry, section 6, finding B of the conditional use permit. That would be-
Approximately 10 new employees. Thank you for helping me find that.
Okay.
So it says approximately 10 new employees. This leads to my other question. So we're hearing in the applicant's presentation that that's actually 16 employees on site. Does that impact the environmental review on the total number of traffic visits if there are 16 people visiting as opposed to 10?
No, that would be based on the land use, so there wouldn't be an impact.
So it doesn't matter how many students, how many employees, any of that?
In terms of parking?
Calculating the number of trips.
Yes,
So I would think a
well,
preschool with 5 students would generate fewer trips than one with 70.
sure, the trips are calculated based on occupancy and the land use.
So what I'm asking is if there are 16 employees as opposed to 10 employees, does that impact the number of trips? Does that impact those calculations? It seems to me that it would.
It would increase, certainly, but it wouldn't exceed the threshold.
So it wouldn't get it anywhere from 6 new employees, it wouldn't increase the number of peak hour trips by 5?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one?
So if there's 6 more employees, it wouldn't increase the peak number of visits by 5? I don't know these calculations, that's why I'm asking. And the reason I'm asking is because the cutoff is 60 net peak hour trips. Anything below that are not subject to a traffic impact study, and this comes in at 55. And if we calculated it on 10 employees as opposed to 16, would that get us closer to that 60 number that's the cutoff?
Right,
It
but
requires the environmental review.
I don't want to interrupt you, but don't we already know that the 16 employees wouldn't be able to all park on the site?
Yes, there are 11
But that wouldn't
parking
affect the
spaces on
trips,
site.
would it? I mean, they still have to make a trip even if they're going to park next door at the London.
But we don't know where they're going to park, and there's no guarantee that they would park at the London. I'm playing devil's advocate, I'm just saying for this particular site, I don't know, I mean, and some people may not have cars.
Can I just say that the trip generation is based on the land use? It wasn't based on that 10. The 10 was just an estimated number that was used for the general plan consistency finding in the CUP, but the trip generation is based on the land use and number of students, number of classrooms, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Commissioner Bass, I just wanted to make sure that I understood your question.
No, that was important. I wanted to make sure that those calculations were correct, that's all.
Well, do you want to go, Sue? I was gonna offer to go.
I mean,
I can open, I don't usually, but I can.
I'm happy to do that. First
Go
of
for
all,
it.
I want to tell the applicant that I think it's a great idea to have a preschool in West Hollywood. We need it. I support it in that sense. I am very, and I think you've been very mindful and have made a lot of effort to work out a lot of the issues that you thought might happen. So I want to commend you on that. And I do believe that you care about children and that you care about education. And I'm glad to see that you have chosen to come to West Hollywood to open your school. I am concerned about the traffic. I'm supportive of the concept, but I'm not really sure that that this is going to work out, and you don't have a plan B if it doesn't. Just say that you'll figure it out, but I want to know what the plan B would be if this doesn't pan out as a good process to get the children in and out of school safely in the morning without creating too much of a traffic problem on San Vicente there. Especially going up to Sunset at that light, like they said, there's a stop sign there. You're going to have to go onto Sunset. Now in the morning, the traffic is going the other way most of the time, so in the morning it may not be an issue, but in the afternoon, they're going both directions, and it's jammed on Sunset up there. And it starts not at 4:30 or 3:30 when school lets out. It starts around 2:30 in the afternoon, and it's bumper to bumper along Sunset pretty much every day. So I'm concerned about that. But I think it's a beautiful building. You've put a lot of thought into how to use the space and make it safe and interesting for children. And I'm supportive of that. So I'm going to listen and hear what other people are saying, but I haven't quite determined whether I'm willing to support the project right now, even though I really would want to.
Commissioner Caballero.
Thank you. So in design review, I had a couple of questions about the elevations, which you've resolved beautifully. I think this is an incredibly elegant building. I love that it's a great language for a preschool. I like that you did not go to primary colors, basic blocks. You really treat the child with respect and elegance and design. I like how the program is laid out. I would be excited to go to school here. Antonio. So Antonio and I had a conversation a couple of days ago, and I was worried that these traffic issues would come up, and here we are spending so much time discussing the traffic. And I hear from our applicant that they are very committed to working this out. And I hear the conviction in their voice. I feel like they can't prove it to us right now, but the applicant did say that if it didn't work out, they could possibly increase it from a half hour to 45 minutes per drop-off cycle. I just did with Antonio a couple of calculations. If you basically have the worst case scenario is 36 cars within a half hour. That's basically 4 cycles. 4 cycles in a half hour seems reasonable. Of course, there's an issue if they all happen to show up at the same time, but as the applicant said, and as I agree with the applicant, I think it's a rare circumstance that they would all show up at the same time. But given that, Antonio and I discussed that in these type of projects, it is typical that they do a traffic report, I think it was called, at the 1-year mark. And I suggested to Tonio at the time, could we consider, and I would like us to consider, having one at the 1 month, 3 months, 6 month, and 1 year, so that we understand the actual traffic impacts on the street and not try to make all these hypothetical situations, which are all very real, and I hear them, but it's a great project. I don't think we should turn away from this project. We should give whatever we can to this project to have it succeed on site. One of the things that Antonio and I discussed, which I was particularly concerned about, is people headed south on San Vicente and then trying to do a left turn into the driveway. I see this happening all the time at the Fred Siegel on Sunset, and I've already contacted engineering about that one. But if that happens here in such a tight intersection, even if we do double lines, I think that would be even a greater kind of traffic issue, because then that backs everything up onto San Vicente in the opposite direction. Either way, I think the city is aware of these things. In terms of construction, the city has construction mitigation plans and management plans already in place. I hear the community's concern about having another project under construction on San Vicente that just needs to be managed, and I have faith in the city's management program that will be resolved. With that 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, 1 year traffic study review in place, I'm willing to support this project.
Thank you. Commissioner Bass?
Yeah, I like the suggestions from our vice chair that this be reviewed, and I think that since the issues are noise and traffic, I've only been here a year and a half, and so my only example of a similar sort of situation would be Catch. This isn't a restaurant, but it is noise and traffic. I mean, ultimately, who's making the noise is different, but the issues are the same. So we required them to come to the Planning Commission. I don't know that every one of these timelines that you recommend, the 1, the 3, the 6, the year, all have to come here. Perhaps staff can do some of those, but we hear at least 1 or 2 of those at this level, because I believe that that gives the public the opportunity to weigh in if they don't feel like they're being heard. Although I believe the applicant would hear them. I know that from my experience, I know our staff would hear them. I sometimes feel like people need to say it here to feel like they've actually been heard, so I want to provide that opportunity. Having said that, I I wish that all the students in not just West Hollywood, but the region would have people who cared as much about them want to open up a preschool that looked like this that you're proposing. So I think it's a fantastic concept, and I applaud it in that capacity. That being said, I can't support the project. And the reason for that is we're required to issue a conditional use permit. And as I look at the code for conditional use permit, and I'm a stickler for the rules, and it just, as I look at the language specifically around this, it says the site has to be physically adequate for the intensity with the absence of physical constraints. I think too narrow of a driveway is a physical constraint. I think that it says the design is compatible with existing and future land uses on site and in the vicinity, and I don't believe that that has been accomplished here. It says that the operation of the proposed use must not constitute a menace. And I think that we're looking at something that is going to really create a problem. I think we can get around the sound. I really do. I think we need to hear it. If this commission decides to approve it, I think that we need to hear that in the future, and that condition would be a good one. But I don't see that the traffic has been adequately addressed. And because I don't think the traffic has been addressed, let me be real. I said this to Tony on the phone, and I'll be really honest. It's easy at Catch Restaurant when people are drinking and screaming because they're drunk or something like that to hold them accountable. But when kids are screaming or parents want to pick up their kid, it's a lot harder to hold that accountable because we all feel for that situation. We all know that there's the stressed mom or dad who's trying to just pick up their kid and they've had a rough morning and it's taking too long and so they're backed up and traffic and all this sort of stuff. I think that would be more difficult to hold accountable after the fact. And because of that, I want to make sure it's addressed in advance. And that's my big hang up. And I want to vote for this, but I just simply can't get there.
Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Hi, I'm going to agree with my fellow commissioners. I think this is it is a beautiful project, and it couldn't be in a more perfect location. I mean, to be proximate to the elementary school, I think it's perfect. However, I have some grave concerns about the findings, and when one of the traffic mitigations is to say drive around the block and go up San Vicente, turn right on Sunset, go down Larrabee, and then come around Cynthia and come back up again, which for those of us who live near there know that's about a 10-minute to 15-minute drive on bad days. That's going to blow the window of that opportunity to do the drop-off or the pickup. And I'm really having a hard time coming up with a finding that says that isn't an impact, and that to set a precedent of us saying sending traffic to circulate is an okay mitigation doesn't sit well with me. I think that this has not been fully addressed, and the backup onto San Vicente is the potential just sets an incredibly bad precedent. And I agree entirely with Commissioner Bass, because I have a note here, catch, that we had all of these sound issues and we didn't address them up front, and then we had to come back and have all these hearings and all these remediations. And I'd like to, if my colleagues choose to go forward with this, agree 100% with Commissioner Caballero about the reporting. He went one step further than me. He added 1 month. I didn't have that in there. And that there be, I think, and that was in 8.5. I think this needs to be clarified. 8.5 is just says provide a report. It doesn't really say what it should be, what should be included in it, and what the consequences of that report are. So whether, again, I think Commissioner Caballero's right, the report should come back to this body and be addressed in a public forum for the community to address. I think that a post facto noise study should be part of that, so it's not just a traffic study, but a noise study, so that we look at how, if in fact there are problems, how we could possibly mitigate that. I don't want to discourage this project, but I also don't want to set precedents that that are not remediatable, what is the word, after the fact. And I do believe that the sound study was not adequate, and hearing from the neighbor that the study from that balcony, which was presented in the sound study as this study, was 10 minutes at 8 o'clock in the morning, that just, I already had grave concerns about the study, and I won't go into all my little notes on it, but sound spikes exactly paralleled at 3:30 and 4 a.m., twice, both days, that didn't match the rest of the study and couldn't be answered as to why these anomalies popped up and why we should trust the rest of the data if those anomalies exist. These are all things that are very concerning to me before we start going down this path. That said, I'm not sure if we can address them in remediation of the conditions at this time, and I will leave it to the rest of my colleagues.
Sorry, Commissioner Altschul.
Yeah, I agree with the commissioners that have spoken before me, and given that I can count, I have enough fingers, that means that there is a majority that is currently against the project. But I would suggest, I agree that the building is fantastic, that the use is a wonderful one. I don't agree with Lynn that San Vicente is the best street for it. I think one with less traffic and some ability to have encroachment at the curb lane would be better. But it could work. And I think if the applicant put some time and effort into resolving the issues that we are articulating that make it not workable at this time, and we wouldn't give a CUP to any other kind of a business where they say, well, we'll take care of it no matter what. And I agree that we shouldn't give a CUP to this kind of an operation, even though it's warm and fuzzy and mostly wonderful, mostly desirable. So I can't support it at this time. And I would suggest, if the applicant thinks that they can address these things in solid fashion rather than wishes, prayers, and trust in their abilities, which I'm not questioning, but we don't do that in any other situation. I would suggest that we consider an appropriate continuance for them if they think they can resolve these things. And if they do, I would like them to take into consideration all of the construction malfeasances that happened in the same construction, I guess, company and architect in the condominium across the street that Mr. Viscott brought up, and I think that we could probably resurrect those from the tape. I would like to see a condition for the traffic reviews that Ruggiero recommended. I would like to see a condition about the ratio of adults in the room to the students in the room. And I find it difficult to believe that in 25 seconds you can wrest an 18-month-old or any kind of a toddler from its parent, along with its diaper bag and its lunch and its blanket, in 25 seconds. So I would like to see all of that clarified, and I'd like to see if there's a video that it have some relationship to what they're trying to do here and not to something that's pie in the sky.
Thank you. Commissioner Erickson?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to commend the applicant. It's very rare you find a person that's willing to talk about education in such an elegant way, as well as come from a wonderful family that obviously prioritizes education. So kudos on raising such a wonderful young woman, or young professional woman. So kudos to you. I'm really torn because I talk to people all the time, and this city needs schools. We need schools of this age. We have parents that have very young children, and they're looking for schools that I think fit the mission of what the applicant is projecting and that type of vision. So, and the elegance that Rogerio talked about of putting them in such a beautiful structure is something that I think that they get through some metaphysical way that makes a lot more sense, that they're not just getting an education, they're getting it in a state-of-the-art building. So the architecture and the design is not a problem for me. But I do have to admit and agree with many of my colleagues that the practicality of how they would get in and out of that building is something I can't just support at the moment. And I support what Commissioner Alschel was saying with coming back. I just think this project isn't baked enough. And I think that we need to look at some of these mitigations and some of these serious concerns that happen. San Vicente is a really horrible street. I mean, that street is just jam-packed with cars. I mean, it took me an hour to go 1 mile. That's why I showed up at 6:28. And and I say that in jest, but I say that in reality of like having driven or trying to go up San Vicente in that way north of Santa Monica Boulevard at a certain time, it is almost impossible. I worry about the number of people that would be required to actually pull those feet off, and that's why I just say it's not baked enough. I'm supportive of the idea, and I'm happy for it to come back, and I'm happy to support with fellow commissioners some type of continuance to go back to the staff level to see if these issues can be addressed. But unfortunately, and the sound issues alone, I think I agree with Commissioner Hoopengartner. I think that the report was insufficient, and we would need to see another one, but I just can't support the project at this time.
Thank you. So I'm not going to kind of repeat what everyone else has said, or I'll try not to. Or I will say that I don't know that I think that Catch is a great example. Most of the problems we've had with Catch have been related to nighttime noise. These are between the hours of, it looks like 8 and 4:30 p.m. So I just want to call that out. Catch, if you're not familiar, is a restaurant literally right behind us and above. And there have been a number of complaints from residents, less so recently, about noise mitigation abutting a residential area. So I don't want to draw that analogy. I also want to be respectful of people who may work from home during the day. I did for several years, so I understand kind of the leaf blowers and sounds of the world. Again, design-wise, I think it's an incredible project. We need more preschools in West Hollywood. Since I have been on commission, we actually denied a preschool project up on Horn, mostly because of traffic. And I think we also approved a site-specific plan for a center for early education, which is also nearby. So I think everyone sitting up here recognizes the need for more preschools in the city. My concerns as well focus, kind of center around the traffic issue, mostly in the afternoon on San Vicente, because I think you're talking to 7 people who live in the city and I used to drive on that street every day on my way home from work. It's not a fun street to be stuck on. I will say that. To build consensus, because I didn't hear anybody up here who wants to deny the project outright. I think that we all recognize the need for this in the city of West Hollywood, and I didn't get the sense that anybody wants to. It sounds like people really want to support this. It sounds like traffic is our biggest issue. So to the end of building consensus and hopefully helping you get this to the place where we can give you a positive answer, I think what I'd like to hear from my fellow commissioners are solutions that would, whether it's for continuance, sending this back to design review, if it's design related, working with staff or something. I don't think it's design related. I think that it needs to be something that relates to traffic mitigation and traffic flow. That seems to be the kind of the deal breaker here.
Noise.
And noise a bit.
Noise too. I personally, I'm going to say, I'm not as concerned about the noise, but I do want to give kind of the community its due, and there is someone who's expressed concern about that. So it sounds like the noise also needs to be addressed, but it does sound like traffic is kind of the big stopping point for most of us up here. So to that end, does anyone up here?
I would like, if I may, Madam Chair.
Sure.
I have a motion.
May I ask
Lauren?
a question?
I was going to ask Lauren a question.
There's 2.
Okay.
Maybe it's the same question.
Who did you recognize first, Madam Chair?
Her.
Sue, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, Commissioner. I agree. I think everybody here wants to vote in favor of this project, but we've got serious concerns. I don't want to deny it because I don't want to put because I want to prove it. So that's where we're at. So I want to have the city and the applicant work on these issues as best as they can and bring it back to us. Are we under a time constraint with this project for any reason?
I was going to ask that same question.
Well, two lawyers.
No.
So we have no time
We've got
constraint.
time to continue it.
We have time to continue it, and how much time do we have? I mean, do we have time to actually work on this
Considering
I
the
think
hearing
we
has
have
been
plenty of time
partially
because
held.
there's a CUP.
the
as part of
CUP
it, so,
issue?
yeah.
Okay. So I would like to move that we, well, I see there's a commissioner, I'll make it, but I'd like to support a motion that would continue the project and request that the applicant work again with staff, particularly the traffic department, and and of course Tony, and try to work this out, bring it back to us, and hopefully then I think we'll be able to support the project and move it forward, because I think we all like it, we want it, but we want it to be a good situation for the city and for the people that live in the area.
We want to feel good about supporting it. Commissioner Altschul.
Lauren, do we need a date certain, or can we have a date uncertain?
No, I think we should do a date uncertain so the applicant has time to do the studies and the analysis you've requested, and we'll renotice when we bring it back.
Then I would make a motion to continue it to a date uncertain.
Okay, we have some more questions. Just one second.
The motion can be made.
Sure.
Is there a second?
I second it. Lynn
No,
already
we have Commissioner
I was-
Hoopengarner.
I was going to make a motion, but
Okay, I want to give the opportunity for anyone to ask questions of staff. Commissioner Bass, did you have a question? Yep. I know, hold on. Commissioner Caballero has a question, actually.
So John Kehoe and I had a conversation last week about these projects when they come to Planning Commission, and we seem to treat them like they're completed packages. And what would you say the level of development of this package is at this point? Like 30% DD, maybe, if that? And here we are sort of treating this project like all these issues are resolved. And I trust staff to sort these things out. I trust the applicant's passion that it will work out. I don't want to hold up this project in the process. I think it should continue to move forward. That said, I get what you're saying and sort of continuing it and bringing it back, but does it really need to come back?
It's either that or denial.
We're all in approval of the project.
We want it to
No.
be approved. We're not in approval of it.
because
Well,
conditions,
wait, hold on. It's like, I hear what you're saying. The traffic is the issue. The secondary issue is sound. I don't feel like the sound is that big of an issue, though I understand this sound tunnel effect that's happening in the neighborhood. Do we not trust staff to sort these issues out? And that by the time this comes out and it permitted, it will be resolved?
It's not the position of staff to sort the issues out. It's the position of the applicant. And as John Erickson said,
John, is that correct?
fully baked.
John Kehoe, is that?
so
It's a little bit different than, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I really want to understand this, sort of being new in this process and having us turn projects back and into the system and jam them up. I don't want that to happen to these projects.
But are
And
we
I just want
not-
to understand how this could be resolved, if it was to be resolved by staff.
excuse me, but also while you're doing that, would you also address, I mean, we are being asked to make findings, and those findings include things that there will be no impacts to the community, et cetera. So I wouldn't disagree with you in that respect, but we're being asked to vote on these findings that are part of this resolution. And so saying trusting staff, but we're voting on these words with these things in them, and we're saying we agree with them. And hence my motion for a continuance to address the things that we've brought up and say, we're at the 90% mark, but I can't make these findings because I see these specific issues, and therefore, I think they're addressable in the resolutions. I think they're addressable by fixing the sound study, by doing a couple of the things that we discussed. And if we want to discuss about them offline, we can, but I can't personally make the findings. So John, with that, I'll let you.
Thank you. So I think what I was when we talked earlier, we were talking more about construction issues for buildings themselves and the construction issues as they relate to building project review and the building review of the project versus the planning commission review of the project and the design of the buildings. I think in this particular case, the commission is raising concerns with the layout of the access into the building and doing the circle and then backing out of the building. So if that was going to change, there might need to be some changes to the structure. And, so there might be some issues that might change how that driveway access is. So I think in this particular case, continuing the item might be warranted, so we can more fully look at that issue.
I would like to address...
And operations.
I'm sorry.
And the operations, and we can further work with the applicant to get the operations down as well.
I mean, we saw an issue that we continued a few weeks ago that I actually took the position that we didn't need to have it come back to commission. We should just let staff handle this. So I tend to think that if staff can handle it, that we should let them do that. So I'm in agreement with our vice chair in that. I would vote if it was just the project, move it to a different location, that sort of thing. I could support the project. What I'm having a problem voting for is the conditional use. So for me, I find it's not a project issue, which I would be fine with staff handling. It's the conditional use side of it that I'm having a problem voting for. So just to clarify my comments and where I think that it needs to come back to the commission.
Right, and the project is contingent upon the conditional use permit.
Obviously, so the scenario I gave is not realistic, but that's why I can't vote for the project, is because I can't vote for the conditional use.
Is our city engineer here?
No, he's not.
So I guess to just play devil's advocate on allowing staff to address these issues, our city engineer, per the applicant's statement itself, said they did not find any issues with the issues that we are finding concerns about. So although I have great respect for city staff, having been one for 6 years, we are disagreeing with that finding of our city engineer. So therefore, since there's a majority of us saying that city engineer's findings we don't agree with, that's why it needs to come back here. So that's just why I'm pushing back, because that city engineer is the one that seems to make it have seemed to the applicant that all things were.
You're talking about the traffic engineer.
Yes, when she mentioned that in her presentation or rebuttal. But I'm just saying that's why I have a problem, and I would want it to come back here personally. Thank you.
So we have a motion on the floor. Again, before you make a motion, please say that you'd like to make a motion and move it, just because I was looking at our screen. So Commissioner Hoopengarner has a motion on the floor. Would you like to state your motion, please?
Yes, I move that this item be continued to a date uncertain to allow staff to work with the applicant to address the issues surfaced here, in particular in the CUP, in terms of, per Commissioner Cavaliero's recommendation about the reviewed periods and the reporting, and in particular to readdress the noise study so that it addresses the issues surfaced here. Items, I won't go into all of them because there were quite a few, but I think they're mitigable, and there's some things we can do in here, but I can't make these findings right now. So that's my motion.
And we have a second. Commissioner Buckner, you second?
I do.
All right, unless there's any further
It says on the screen, motion to adopt. It's not a motion to adopt, it's a motion to continue.
Well, but the screen doesn't have the ability to change those words.
Well, we do.
And that's what I said.
Right,
It's
a motion to continue, so being
I just wanted
clear.
clarified that the motion is to continue, not to adopt anything.
And my second is basically in agreement that those are the issues that were raised here are the issues that they need to address before it comes back to commission. And some of them might be able to get resolved, and we may be in a similar situation, and we'll have to deal with that when it happens. So.
All right, let's call the question. So I'd like to can I say something to the applicant? So this is a little unconventional, just so you know. Generally speaking, we hear something and then make a decision on whether to recommend it and move it forward in the planning process, or we deny it. And I think what we're essentially doing is giving you another shot. I know that West Hollywood is not the easiest place on earth to develop in. We recognize that. I think we all really, really like the project and want it to work. So we're giving you another go at it. We're going to let you work with staff, and we will look forward to seeing you back here soon.
And just to clarify, the motion did pass unanimously to continue to a date uncertain, which at that time will be renoticed.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick break. We'll reconvene in about 5 minutes. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting back to order. Sorry, we had some procedural things. I know that was 6 minutes and 46 seconds longer than 5 minutes. Also, I'm not trying to beat a hasty retreat. I'm just really cold and not leaving anytime soon for my extra on the Almost Famous set or something. Okay, moving on to, of course, I'm completely unorganized right now. It's my bad. We're moving on to item 11A, which is a new business item. This is discussion of affordable housing density bonus calculations on mixed-use projects. So we had asked that this be agendized at a previous meeting, and I just want to be clear for the purposes of everyone on commission and for members of the public and for anyone watching what exactly this item is. So there will not actually be a formal staff presentation. This is an opportunity for us to ask questions of staff, to discuss, and to hear from members of the public. And I think the question, well, I may defer to staff once we get a little deeper in here, but there's not really if we take a formal action, it would be whether we try to move it forward with a recommendation to council, correct? Okay, so we haven't really done this before. How would you like to kick this off? Or how would we like to kick this off?
Shall I, since it was my motion?
Sure.
So I brought this forward and asked my colleagues to put it on the agenda because there's a recent trend in the mixed-use projects that we're seeing here in West Hollywood where we're no longer achieving our stated goal of 20% affordable housing. Let's let that sink in for a minute. We, the city built on affordable housing, are now approving projects that do not achieve our minimum of 20% affordable housing. In fact, we've had a couple that are 11%, 14%. And so, unfortunately, this is due in part to recent changes in the state law. The result is less affordable housing in mixed-use projects, especially in cities such as ours that already have progressive affordable housing codes. The state goal was and is to promote more affordable housing. The unintended consequences of these changes in the law have resulted in the opposite. The good news is that the state does leave local jurisdictions discretion over the balance of mixed-use code, giving us the opportunity to address the issue locally. And the sooner we do so, the sooner we can get back to 20% affordable housing in all of our mixed-use projects. I believe this is a significant issue and that there are viable and practical adjustments we can make to our code that will reflect our core values and achieve these goals. I would like to recommend that the Planning Commission ask staff to study this issue and develop alternatives to the question, how can we modify our code to continue to work within state law and still achieve our goal of 20% affordable housing for mixed-use projects?
Thank you. David, just a quick question. Do we have any public speakers on this item?
We do. We have one.
What would be the appropriate time to hear from the public on this? Should we invite them up now?
Yeah, there's no staff report, so any time during would be fine.
You're shaking your head. Would we like to continue conversation? It's Mr. Levin, yes.
If it would inform your deliberation discussion, now would be an appropriate time.
Well, we'll ask you. Mr. Levin, would you like to speak on this item at this time?
More appropriate for me to speak after I hear some more Q&A to understand sort of what the parameters of the discussion are.
That's fair.
If that's all right.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to ask staff, can you give us a quick rundown, just again, mostly for the public record, as to how this is calculated at the current time? Mr. Peter Noonan?
Happy to. Just a point of clarification, if we could. It appeared when I was listening to Commissioner Hoopengardner that may be a motion that you put forward. That is a motion.
That's what I said I would like to move, yes.
There's actually no official motion.
But that was for conversation purposes, and we're here for a conversation.
Okay. Thank
there's
you.
no
Just for
official
point of
motion on the
clarity, I just
floor
wanted
at
to know
this
where
time.
we were in the process. Thank you.
Consider it a comment at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Essentially, the state density bonus is an additional number of housing units above what would otherwise be developed in a housing project that is proposed. And so we do achieve a 20% above the units that are otherwise allowed. We aren't allowed to require an inclusionary requirement in the bonus that is given. The state law doesn't allow us to apply our requirement to that percentage of additional units. And so, yes, in fact, the number of units that are built at a site inherently will never include 20% purely. And the state density bonus law, the goal of that is not to achieve the maximum number of affordable units. We're told in section R that we are to interpret it liberally to provide the greatest number of units. And so the state law itself just wants units built, whether they're affordable or not. We are required to do that. So there is some case law on this. I'm not prepared tonight to talk about that, but this has been looked at, and we ultimately cannot apply our 20% requirement to the bonus units. We can provide that to the units below. I would really, honestly, at this point, just conclude on that note and just sit back and listen to your thoughts.
So, as I said, I think the state law doesn't allow us to change the state law regarding the affordable housing, but it does allow us to change our zoning code, for example, as to the amount of commercial that is the component of the entire building, and therefore the basis for the additional residential. And I think that's where the opportunity lies for us to achieve more proportionality than we have been historically. And the state law, is my understanding, does allow us to do just that. Am I correct?
We can certainly look into that, absolutely. Thank you.
And that was the point of my motion, is to say, how can we, just take a study as to what we can do within the code that we do have power over to make sure that these mixed-use projects do achieve the most possible. And I believe there are ways for us to adjust our zoning ordinance to just the mix, and thus do the achievements that we want in the affordable housing component.
Sorry, Commissioner Altschul.
Which I think is a very admirable goal, but I think it's a little precipitous to try to do very much right now, because every day in the LA Times, I think today and certainly over the last couple of weeks, we see where the governor and members of the legislature are introducing bills to further cut back the cities and all cities' ability to control these things. So I'm not so sure whatever we come up with would be able to stand up 6 months from now.
Okay, under that, we would never move forward, though, because Assembly's always making more bills and more things. I appreciate your comment, but I do think that there's ways for us to look at it and maybe address it as it stands now.
Yeah.
Today or yesterday's paper talked about a senator from somewhere in the Bay Area that has another new bill that says you can't do anything to change the requirements for housing beyond what it was yesterday, among other things.
I think again, just to kind of give some context here, some of the mitigating kind of factors here is the fact that West Hollywood has been so progressive and so forward-thinking in its approach to affordable housing, e.g. inclusionary units, not rent stabilization, to be clear, that the state is forcing the hand of cities who have not built affordable housing and who have not let projects move forward in such a way that we are sometimes kind of rocking a hard place by state law. We don't usually do this, is so uncavalier, but Mr. Levin, is the commission open to hearing from Mr. Levin at this point in time?
I have a question on the procedure, though. I feel that we're getting into a little bit of a murky area, because I feel like we're including an additional commissioner that's not on the commission, and we're taking, it's different. I think that's why we needed to hear the comments prior to have us in that conversation. I don't know. I just feel like we're in a little bit of a murky territory here.
You mean that because Mr. Levin is a member of Historic Preservation?
No, no, no. What I'm trying to say is that we're involving and having conversation with the public in that way. I don't know. I just feel like there's something that does not seem right here, and it's
I'll
just
defer to the city attorney. We don't
it's-
usually have public hearings like this, and it looks like
I don't
Mr.
know.
Levin, to confirm, is our only public speaker, correct, David?
I think it's appropriate to hear public comment on any
course.
agenda item. It's actually
No,
required
I'm
under
not
the.
saying that that's not the problem. I'm saying that we're having discussion and then we're going, there's like this back and forth, and that's where I'm saying I feel like we're getting into a little bit of a gray area.
Why don't we stop?
Yeah.
We'll hear the public comment, and then the commission can go back.
Close
to
the public
talking
comment
about-
portion, and then we can commence discussion. That sounds good. With that, I'd like to call Mr. Levin up to the podium. Thank you for bearing with us through this process.
It's a unique situation. Thank you, Chair. The concern that's been raised is that the bonus is tending to dilute the percentage of affordable units that we're getting. That's true of mixed use. It's true of as Mr. Noonan said, that's true of density bonus in general. We calculate the 20% on the base density on a residential project. We then add a 35% bonus ostensibly to that, and that bonus units tends to dilute the affordable units well below 20%. Typically, it's about 13.5–14%. The problem that we have is that state density bonus law does not treat mixed use very well, because mixed use does not deal with units per acre. It's based on floor area ratios. It's based on total square footage. So we have to establish what that base density is. We basically arbitrarily do that. We then get the bonus. We then take that on top of that. So the only question is, do you base the bonus on the total gross square footage or only on the residential square footage? Now, to Mr. Noonan's point, subdivision R says that we do it liberally to create the maximum number of housing units, which in terms of mixed use translates to maximum floor area, to maximum square footage, and that suggests that we ought to base it on the total amount. Now, because that will give us more residential square footage. Now, more residential square footage translates only imperfectly into more units, because we have no way of telling the applicant you must do more units as opposed to doing larger units. Theoretically, we could establish, as we do for R3 and R4, a maximum average unit size, which means that additional square footage would necessarily translate into more units. I'm not sure that's a great idea. We could look at that, but that again won't translate into more affordable units, because that bonus is typically the market rate units. So you're always going to have that dilution. You're always going to have that issue with any of the mixed use projects. So we could establish a minimum percentage for the commercial area, but again, 65915, the government code suggests that to create the maximum housing units, in this case translates to maximum square footage. So the more bonus we get, the bonus can only be used for residential. The bonus cannot be used for commercial, whether you bonus only the residential or whether you bonus the total project. You can only use that bonus square footage for residential. So yes, we could establish a minimum square minimum square footage for commercial, and then say you can bonus only the residential. State law doesn't seem to support that, but that's going to give you less residential square footage. So there may be ways to achieve this, but it really is a problem with the way mixed use is handled under the state density bonus law. That needs to be fixed.
Thank you, Mr. Levin.
Thank you.
And I think that's precisely why I asked that we ask staff to study this, to see what is there an opportunity for us to do? What is there an opportunity? How is there a way for us to address this within our code to the extent that we have latitude? If not, not. But I'd like us to look at it to see where we have latitude and where we have the opportunity to maximize this. I don't have the answers, I have some ideas, but the idea is to ask the question.
Does staff at this time have, and sorry, I should have done this before, I'm going to close the public comment portion of the hearing so that we can move into discussion, which we've kind of already done, but my bad. Does staff have a position at this time in terms of workability, like for us to be able to gain more latitude, or do you feel like state law is kind of a stopping point? I know that we're kind of in a unique position as a city insofar as our code and policies go, so I'm interested to hear your take.
I think that we would be, with council direction, we would be open certainly to putting this on our work plan and answering the question. So it's my understanding that this evening that the commission, if the commission would want to move forward, that you would want to make a motion requesting that the city council direct staff to explore this. And then the next step would be that we would bring that to a subcommittee of the council, which is the chair and it's the mayor and the mayor pro tem. If they see that as appropriate for the council, it would then be placed on the council's agenda to direct us. We would then, as staff, be able to include that into our work plan and then proceed forward with the exploration.
Okay. Commissioner Hoopengarner, is your motion as stated before I ask? Does anybody else have any questions or points of discussion on this?
Yeah, my motion is, as I stated it, except for I lost my notes, to ask the question. And obviously, yes, you're right, this motion would be to recommend that this go to City Council to look at putting this on the work plan. How can we modify code to continue to work within state law and still achieve the maximum of our goals of 20% affordable housing and mixed use? Understanding the dilution, but plus or minus, about maximizing affordable housing.
Looks like it's been seconded by Commissioner Erickson. Are we ready to call the question for the stated motion? I'm going first.
And the motion passes for a recommendation to go to City Council, noting Commissioner Altshuler voting no.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to item 12, unfinished business. There is none. Item 13, excluded consent calendar. There is none. Item 14A is planning manager's update. Anything at this time? No. Thanks, Bianca. Item 15, public comment.
We do have one, George Biorski.
Thank you. When you come to the podium, please state your name and city of residence. You'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good evening, Commissioners. George Boyarski, reside in WeHo. Depending on how much time I have in the next few meetings, I'd like to comment on 4 points, all of my own making. I tried to get a lid to go over the 4 points, but there is a relationship among them. One, they all concern commission review or commission following up of questions on the area of residential property questions, proposals, et cetera. And, you know, this is in terms of reviews that have stopped, reviews that, in my opinion, should be done differently. You know, questions that are raised by others like moi, and then, you know, don't continue. And, you know, however much consideration any of my comments get, I know that all of you work very hard in an uncompensated manner, you know, to deal with a lot of questions, a lot of detail, and so some of my comments will actually go towards more work for you. So the 4 points are, the first one is in terms of basically the raising of the benchmark for review from 4 units and up to 7 units and up on residential projects, and I'm talking about under R3 zoning, which is basically, you know, what I know. The second point of comment would be basically that the granting of waivers or concessions doesn't really come at the right place. It's at the end of the meeting, at the end of the process. The third point would be don't stop me if you've heard this before.
Sorry, Mr. Bielski, your time's up, but we do welcome you back at future
The
meetings.
colors, brown and gray.
Great, thank you.
And the fourth point was like,
Okay, thank you. Any more public speakers, David Gillig? No. All right, items from commissioners, anyone?
I would like to remind everybody that Election Day is March 5th, and make sure that you vote in our city council election.
I would like to say one thing. I take great offense to some things when they compare very graphic things happening in the public right now to members of this commission. And some of the public comment we've gotten tonight gravely upset me in regards to characterization of who my fellow commissioners are. I don't appreciate that, and I just want to let you know I stand with each and every one of you, and I think that that type of public discourse we don't see here amongst ourselves, and I'm proud of that, and that's why I'm proud to be a commissioner here, because we don't do that.
Thank you. I think I'd just like to add, to address that very comment of which you're speaking, we actually do care very much. I think we all want to make decisions that we feel good about here. There are no hot air balloon rides or fancy dinners. I keep receipts for every meeting that I have with developers because I pay for everything myself, and you can talk to any developer in the city and they can confirm that that is indeed the case. It's also against state law for us to accept gifts above, I think it's $45 or $50. Anything from anyone. So I just want to, I understand that it's frustrating. We do pay attention and we do care. I have a full slate of notes here from tonight's meeting with the name of every public speaker who came out this evening, how people voted on things, our discussion. So I just want to state for the record, it does put me on the defensive a little bit. I do take issue with some of those comments. But I also want to state for the record that, and I will say it again, I will always meet with you. I think there's only one applicant, or I wasn't even for an applicant, there's only one body that I have chosen not to meet with since I've been on commission. So I will meet with you. I think most of us would meet with members of the public if we were asked, and certainly time permitting. And I would say also that the most powerful weapon that you have is your vote. So encourage everybody to vote on March 5th, which is a Tuesday.
I want to just, because the two of you brought it up, I want to let everyone know that the comment that in question, the gentleman said that we had not reached out to him. I did check my email records. I emailed him with my cell phone number 3 days in advance of the last hearing and asked if I could meet with him directly, and I've still not heard back until he spoke tonight. So just the accusation that we're not willing to meet with folks, that's directly not true in that situation too.
And I would like to add one thing further. As you know, I was not at that meeting, that hearing, because I recused myself as I was in the neighborhood, living very close to that particular property. And I would like to encourage that speaker, as well as every citizen, to participate in their neighborhood associations, to participate in the neighborhood meetings. I can actually speak for the fact that I used to be vice president of that particular neighborhood association for 7 years. I've never met that gentleman. So it's an opportunity for everyone to participate actively in their community and get engaged up front before it comes down to the last minute as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from commissioners this evening? No? Great. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting. I hope to see you all here on Thursday, March 7th at 6:30 p.m. Thank you for coming out this evening.